We're live with the latest coverage from the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill. We know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Hello and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. And over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, let's take a look at the latest headlines. 3 Israeli airstrikes kill at least 24 Palestinians in central Gaza. 2 of the strikes struck schools where refugees were taking shelter. Israel says it hit infrastructure which had Hamas fighters inside. Chinese and Japanese Coast Guard vessels engage in a standoff around a group of disputed islands in the East China Sea. This after Chinese ships drove away 4 Japanese fishing boats from the disputed waters just yesterday. Protesters stormed Kenya's parliament compound and set the building on fire. This as lawmakers passed a contentious bill to introduce a raft of new taxes. The European Union extends the right of Ukrainian refugees to stay in the bloc until March 2026 as Russia's invasion continues to devastate their homeland. Currently, over 4 million Ukrainians are registered as refugees in the EU. And the United Kingdom releases WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange from prison after the 52-year-old strikes a deal with the United States and pleads guilty on 1 count of violating the American law on espionage. We begin in the Middle East, where the United States is working feverishly to prevent another war. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Charles Brown has warned Israel of an Iranian response if a war in fact breaks out in Lebanon. The U.S. Air Force General said that Iran would directly involve its armed forces if Israel began a military operation against Lebanon-based Hezbollah. The top U.S. military officer believes that Tehran is more inclined to support Hezbollah in comparison to Hamas. Now, forecasting a full-blown war, General Brown said that the United States military would not be able to provide Israel with air defenses against Iran. However, he added that the United States would in fact defend Israel against any escalation or retaliation by Hezbollah. Now, Washington continues to warn Hezbollah against attacks on Israel. In fact, senior military officers have indirectly told Hezbollah leaders that the United States would support Israel and would not try to prevent any escalation by Israel if Hezbollah continues with its attacks. The American message is designed to push the Lebanon-based group to back down and de-escalate the situation in northern Israel. Now, since October of last year, Hezbollah has fired almost 19,000 rockets into Israel, which has been met with Israeli airstrikes targeting Hezbollah commanders. Now, the blunt messaging from the United States comes as Israel's defense minister continues his visit in Washington.
I'm now going to meet with CIA Director Bill Burns in order to discuss the hostage issue. I have been dealing with this issue since the first day of the war, and I would like to say that it is Israel's primary commitment to return all the hostages, with no exception, to their families and homes. We will continue to make every necessary effort to bring them home. Later in the day, I will meet Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
Now, Gallant is trying to ease tensions with the United States after Prime Minister Netanyahu accused President Joe Biden of withholding weapons shipments to Israel. The defense minister emphasized that the United States remains the most important ally for Israel.
The alliance between Israel and the United States, led by the US over many years, even now, is extremely important. There is nothing more important for the future of the state of Israel, apart from the IDF, than the relationship with the US from a security perspective. This is what we are talking about. We agree on most things. In areas where we have disagreements, we discuss everything in detail and reach agreements and solve issues. And I'm sure this will be the case this time as well.
Meanwhile, President Biden remains committed to preventing an escalation between Israel and Hezbollah. Now, despite the tensions between the two close allies, Washington remains clearly on Netanyahu's side against Hezbollah and Iran. And moving to Russia, the Kremlin has directly blamed the United States for a Ukrainian strike on Crimea that killed at least 4 people and injured over 150. Moscow said the deadly attack was absolutely barbaric as it accused Washington of waging a proxy war. Now, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, Kyiv carried out the strike using American missiles while the U.S. military provided data and targeting coordinates.
Kyiv regime, supported by the USA, carried out a heinous attack against civilians in the Russian city of Sevastopol in Crimea. Ukraine launched 5 US-supplied Attack-MS missiles armed with cluster munitions. All responsible for this and other terrorist attacks will be held accountable. The fact that the US is directly involved in this crime is beyond any doubt.
On Monday, Russia also summoned U.S. Ambassador Lynn Tracy and threatened her with retaliation. Meanwhile, Washington said it regrets any loss of life, adding that the weapons have been provided to Ukraine to defend its sovereign territory, including Crimea.
I will just tell you what the ambassador said when she met with the Russian Foreign Ministry, and that is, of course, that we lament any civilian loss of life in this war. We provide weapons to Ukraine so it can defend its sovereign territory against armed aggression. That includes in Crimea, which, of course, is part of Ukraine. And Russia could stop this war today and end the suffering caused by the war Russia launched today if it would stop its occupation of sovereign Ukrainian territory and stop launching attacks on civilians.
Now, in 2014, Russia unilaterally annexed Crimea. However, most countries still consider it part of Ukraine. Kyiv has previously insisted that its strikes on Crimea are an integral part of its strategy, as they're intended to make it more difficult for Russia to sustain its offensive on the Ukrainian mainland. Now, Vladimir Putin has repeatedly warned of the risk of a much broader war if NATO increases its support to Ukraine. Now, earlier this month, Putin warned he could provide long-range weapons to allied countries to strike Western targets. His remarks came days after the United States, Germany, and France allowed Ukraine to use their weapons to strike inside Russian territory. Putin has also reaffirmed Moscow's readiness to use nuclear weapons in response to a threat to its sovereignty. And now, with a fatal attack in Crimea, the West waits with bated breath to see just how far Putin will go in the aftermath of this devastating blow by Kyiv. And in Beijing, China has issued new guidelines for criminal penalties, including the death penalty for diehard individuals advocating Taiwan's independence. The new guidelines, unveiled last week, come as China increases pressure on Taiwan following the election and inauguration of President Lai Ching-te. China labels President Lai as a dangerous separatist and, as a result, conducted military exercises shortly after he took office. Now, according to Beijing, Taiwan is an integral part of China, and the democratically governed island has only one option, so-called reunification. However, public opinion in Taiwan indicates that the majority do not support unification with the mainland. Instead, the majority support Taiwan's independence, while most favor maintaining the status quo of Taiwan being self-governed. Beijing has not concealed its aversion to President Lai and his pro-sovereignty Democratic Progressive Party. The new measures seem to be Beijing's latest attempt at creating a divide between the Taiwanese public and the new administration. The guidelines specify the death penalty for quote-unquote ringleaders of independence efforts who inflict particularly serious harm to the Chinese state. In response to the new regulations, Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council urged the public not to feel coerced or threatened by the Chinese Communist Party. Assuring support, to the democratically governed island, President Lai also said that Chinese autocracy is the real evil.
China has absolutely no right to sanction Taiwan's people just because of the positions they hold. What's more, China has no right to go after Taiwan people's rights across borders.
Now, President Lai has proposed holding discussions with China, but Beijing has turned down his overtures. China also declined to engage in talks with Lai's predecessor, Tsai Ing-wen, who is also from the same party.
I also want to call on China to face up to the existence of the Republic of China and have exchanges and dialogue with Taiwan's democratically elected, legitimate government. This is the only correct way to increase the welfare of people on both sides of the strait. If this is not done, relations between Taiwan and China will only become more and more estranged.
Now, China has previously implemented legal actions against Taiwanese officials, such as imposing sanctions on Taiwan's former de facto ambassador to the United States, who is now the island's vice president. These penalties have made minimal practical impact since Chinese courts do not have any authority in Taiwan, as the self-governed island remains firm in refuting Beijing's sovereignty assertions. And moving to South America, judges in Colombia have accused the government of tapping their cell phones. They say the Colombian government is using state intelligence agencies to keep an eye on them and their families. Meanwhile, opposition leaders have echoed similar concerns to the judges. However, the Colombian President Gustavo Petro has denied these claims, saying he has always made sure that state intelligence is never used for illegal activities. Our next report goes into detail.
The South American nation of Colombia has been gripped by a massive snooping scandal. Some judges of the Constitutional Court, which is the highest tribunal in the Colombian judiciary, have claimed that their phones are being tapped. Over the weekend, the Colombian media reported that Magistrate Jorge Enrique Ibanez filed a complaint with the Attorney General, saying that he and his wife were victims of wiretapping and permanent monitoring. The complaint accused law enforcement agencies and state intelligence of persecuting them secretly. Now this comes just days after alarm bells went off when a message on WhatsApp went viral in Colombia. It read in Spanish, I quote, "I allow myself to inform you that this phone and this chat have been illegally tapped by the state intelligence agencies." End quote. The prosecutor's office has confirmed that the message came from the same magistrate's cell phone who was trying to caution other people. The Attorney General's office has announced that it is launching an investigation into the surveillance claims. Meanwhile, Colombian reports cited a general confirming that such interceptions had taken place, and top officials of Colombia's National Intelligence Directorate and the government were in question. However, the Colombian president Gustavo Petro has denied the allegations. In a post on social media platform X, Petro said that he's always ordered that intelligence agencies must not be used against the opposition, the press or the courts. The leftist president added that his government does not do what others did in the past, referring to scandals involving previous governments which made spying on journalists, politicians and judges a common practice. However, opposition leaders are not satisfied with Petro's clarification, as they have echoed similar surveillance concerns like the judges. The judges and opposition are levelling spying allegations at a very crucial time for Petro. The president is trying to drum up support to amend the country's constitution after he failed to get reforms through the opposition-controlled Congress. The opposition leaders have accused Petro of seeking to modify presidential term limits so that he could stay in power after 2026. The Colombian constitution was amended in 2015 to prohibit presidents from serving more than one term. While campaigning for election in 2022, Petro had vowed not to touch the constitution, but since then he's changed his track.
y soy su presidente.
And finally, as the 2024 presidential election continues to take shape, former First Lady Melania Trump and Donald Trump's oldest daughter, Ivanka Trump, have become the center of speculation. Melania and Ivanka's absence from the campaign trail and the hush money trial have fueled curiosity about their whereabouts. Earlier this year, when Melania was asked about her future involvement in her husband's campaign, she coyly responded, "Stay tuned." And since then, she has kept a very low profile. Now, questions are now being raised as to why the former president's staunchest supporters are distancing themselves. Our final report takes you inside these questions.
It was a familiar routine in the Manhattan court where Donald Trump became a convicted criminal. Before entering the 15th floor courtroom for his trial each morning, the former US president would take a few steps down the hallway to deliver remarks to the assembled media. As he turned and walked away, someone in the pack would inevitably shout the obvious, unanswered question, "Where's Melania?"
Donald, where's Melania?
The absence of the former First Lady during the 6-week trial and her husband's presidential campaign has left many observers stirring questions. In short, the former First Lady has now become a real-life version of Where's Waldo, and her disappearing act has extended beyond the trial and the campaign trail. Nearly 10 days ago, when Donald Trump celebrated his 78th birthday, greetings poured in from all his near and dear ones, including his presidential contender Joe Biden. But the former First Lady stayed put and was glaringly absent from her husband's birthday celebrations. Melania's absence has now delighted Trump critics who see it as a possible sign that the Republican candidate has lost the backing of his most loyal supporters in his bid for re-election. If his wife were in fact over it, then perhaps the loyalty of his other longtime fans might be liable to fade. Various reports are also speculating that the former model would not spend much of her time in the White House if Donald Trump is re-elected. But it seems like Melania is not the only member in Trump's family who's missing. Donald Trump's eldest daughter, Ivanka Trump, is also nowhere to be seen apart from her presence on social media. She and her husband Jared Kushner skipped the courtroom during the final arguments in the hush money trial. However, the former advisor uploaded a picture of her father and herself, quoting, "I love you, Dad," followed by a heart emoji. Last year, Ivanka Trump decided to bow out of US politics and not actively join her father's bid to run again for the White House in 2024. Ivanka said she had chosen to prioritize her young children and a private life, making it evident that she will only support her father virtually. So, whether Melania is putting her husband in his place now, or the role Ivanka Trump plays in her father's campaign remains unknown. But as the campaign progresses and Melania's missing posters and questions on Ivanka's missing physical presence take over, critics are left in disarray, making them wonder if the duo will step into a more public role or whether they'll continue to support Donald Trump from the shadows.
That's all we have time for today. We certainly thank you so much for tuning in. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks again for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on First Post America.